Hi, now John Penland with talking about security considerations for Plone providers. Thank you.
Okay, well, thanks for coming. Before we start, I'll just do a little bit about myself. So, my name's John Pentland. I live and work in Birmingham in the UK with my wife and daughter. I've been a Plone developer for about 15 years, and I've been working for PretAGov for the last 6 years. We do mostly government contracts, websites, applications, and a little bit of sort of non-government third sector kind of work, both in the UK and Australia. And yeah, there's my GitHub. I'll probably put these slides on there afterwards. So at the start of last year, our company undertook an accreditation process. The main reason we did this was because basically all of our contracts now sort of stipulate that you have to have a bare minimum security accreditation, whereas before it tended to be more giving your the details of your security setup. And so we went through this process of what's called Cyber Essentials. So Cyber Essentials is a UK accreditation. It was introduced to be a sort of basic minimum level of security for companies and sort of designed to be easy to achieve. It's a self-assessed process. You sort of submit your assessment, and then they mark it and make sure that everything's correct. But there's no auditing of it. There are plenty of other accreditation schemes. So there's NIST in the US. There's the International Standards Organization do their 27000 series. We've got the PCI DSS, which is the payment card industry. So if you take credit card payments, there's accreditation for that. There's SOC, which is financial information if you work in the financial industries. And there's the European Union has their own standards as well. I'm not really going to be talking any more about these. This talk's not really about achieving accreditation. It was just to sort of give a bit of context into why I wanted to talk about this. So really what I wanted to do with this talk was to try and boil down the main simple things that we had to do to get the accreditation and what that meant for the security of the organization as a whole. And then also then some more specific things about web security, and then a little bit more specifically about Plone and Volto. So we start with the most basic, which is the most basic part of the security, which is on the organization level. So it's kind of non-technical. It's also the one that's going to have the most variation between companies. Depends on the size of the company, with the way you work, whether you've got offices, whether you work remotely. So it's going to be a bit sort of vague, really. So the first thing is how you manage your secrets. So I think the key areas here are that when you have passwords, that they're high quality and that they're unique. I think that's a fairly standard thing, and making sure that you sort of do that across the organization is really important. Again, not writing down passwords, I guess it's simple, but it's just an important thing to make sure you do. So the way we solved that was by putting a password manager in across our organization, and it solved a number of problems and gave us a really good solution across the company. So the main thing is it's secure. We don't. It's all encrypted. We keep the keys, all that kind of stuff. It's a cloud provided services. There's many of them. I'm not gonna sort of give more details on what that was, but there's plenty out there to choose from. The key thing it does for us is it generates the passwords for us. So it makes sure that human error doesn't come into play when we generate passwords. It allows us to have a password policy which says it has to be a minimum length. It has to include certain characters, and it really just takes away human error. It allows us to securely share secrets within our company. So rather than using like Slack or something, if we've got an API key or we've got something else we need to share, we've got a place that does that really securely. And finally, the thing that it really did was it allowed us to audit all of our passwords. So if we had passwords that had been compromised or that were weak, we get a score much like Lighthouse gives you for your website. And it allowed us to just go through everything and make sure that we really had no weak points in the organization with regards to passwords. The second thing that I think pretty much all accreditation is going to want to make sure you do is that your devices are secure. And it's really at a simple level. It's just the basic things like enabling firewalls, making sure you've got antivirus installed and running, managing the software that's on there. Again, it doesn't have to be completely managed from a technical level, but at least having a policy in place to make sure that you know what software is on there. Making sure that the software is up to date. You know, if software can have automatic updates, it should be on. The operating system should be done automatically. It shouldn't be something that you're relying on users and staff to be sort of remembering to do. Having a software policy in place means that you can sort of say, well, what software can you install? How do you install it? Do you need to get approval for it? Again, it's kind of a unique thing depending on your sort of individual needs. And then handling out-of-date and legacy software. This is quite a tough one. For Cyber Essentials, they basically said, you know, you can't run out-of-date software, and so if you're running Python 2 to develop your Plone 4 stuff, it's kind of a bit of a problem. So the way we're able to solve that is by taking Python off the operating system and working in Docker. That's what we do. I guess maybe it's not for everybody. Most of our development now is Volto, and it's up to date, so it's not a problem. But occasionally we have to look after things that are older, and Docker and virtual machines was the way for us to go. But I think you are able to have multiple versions of Python and things, and you're able to do it different ways. But I think the main thing is that the core software on the devices can't be out of date or out of support. So the third and quite big thing that was quite time consuming for us was to go through the cloud software that we use. Since the pandemic, we've been completely remote, and so we make really extensive use of cloud and SaaS software. And so we had to then audit all of the services that we use to make sure that there's nothing wrong there. And what that means is that we have a policy in place for adding services. So if we want to use a new SaaS service, we have to sort of have that agreed at a management level to make sure that we keep control over what we have, when we have a list of everything we have. And so the rules that we kind of have to follow are that if a SaaS service gives you individual accounts, you should use them. You shouldn't be sharing accounts between users. You should set up the access level. You should be giving users and staff the minimum amount of access to a service that they need to do their job, not just giving sort of admin access to everybody. And that, following on from the secrets, every separate service should have a unique and secure password. It's really easy to do with password management. And using multi-factor if that's provided by the service, it's one of the simplest ways to keep things secure on that end. And going down through and closing unused accounts, having data sort of spread across places is kind of really, really bad from a security point of view. So making sure that if you don't use a service anymore, that you've closed that account and made sure there's no information or sensitive information that's left on there. So the second main area is infrastructure security. This kind of covers everything to do with like serving things. So it doesn't necessarily have to be physical hardware. It can include cloud services or infrastructure as a service. So if you use Amazon or Google Cloud or something. The first thing that Argo accreditation demands is that you understand what you have and you define a scope of what you've got. And it's just as simple as just putting an image together like this. This is the sort of reference image that Cyber Essentials give you to say this is what we want to see in your submission. So it includes everything from users, the devices, whether they're using bring your own devices. It includes network boundaries. So if you've got multiple offices or and where they are in terms of the sort of network picture. It includes servers and cloud services and any networking equipment such as Wi-Fi or firewalls. And so the sort of main things you have to sort of think about with your infrastructure is controlling how you get in and out of that. So simple things like making sure that you've closed ports. And that, if you're using something like SSH or if you install a VPN. For us, we found the simplest thing to do was to just use a VPN to get into all of our services. We were able to have a VPN with two-factor, and then it's like we're inside a network, which is much easier for us from a operational point of view than having to use things like SSH tunnels. But that sort of thing is fine. So minimum required access would be, again, making sure that users don't have more access on your equipment or your servers than they need. And then we go through sort of the same sort of basic stuff that we need to do on the devices, which is keeping things up to date, making sure there's a firewall, using antivirus if that's something that you need. It may be not so important on something like Ubuntu, but if you've got maybe say Windows servers, and having a backup and disaster recovery system that's tested and that works. I think one of the big things that's happening a lot is crypt locker scams, where you might not lose any data, you might not be completely taken down or anything, but if you sort of wake up one morning and all your data's been encrypted and you're being held to ransom, making sure that you can recover from that is as important as trying to prevent it in the first place. And I think that a key thing is making sure that the devices that you're backing up don't really have any ability to delete those backups, that they're in a sort of separate location that can't be deleted from that sort of same place that has access to the information that might get cryptoed. So they're the sort of basic things. I just wanted to sort of rush through those. Really, the core of what I wanted to talk about was the web and security around there. As Plone providers, we kind of feel that Plone's secure. Plone markets itself as secure, and I think that's largely true. But I also think it's important that we do things, we set things up in a way that enhances that and really make sure that there's more than just relying on Plone to be secure. So this is just a really sort of simple kind of overview of what a sort of standard system might look like. Obviously, you could be using many different ways of doing this, but I think a sort of standard transaction with it for a website would be a browser that goes through some kind of proxy and load balancer, and then that would go to your application servers, and then behind that you might have things like your databases and your search servers. And so really what we're talking about here is that area there. So maybe some stuff on the web servers and maybe a lot of sort of work that you do in that proxy side to make sure that you're kind of enhancing the security in front of Plone. So we'll start with the simple. I mean, it's 2023. I think everything, any kind of thing should be HTTPS. The key points there is that not only is your data encrypted with HTTPS, but also that there's some verification that you own the website, which is really good protection against somebody spoofing your site to try and steal information from users. So Let's Encrypt. I'm sure you've heard of it, but I think it's just such a great tool to use. It provides free certificates. They have lots of documentation on their website for every different kind of web server that you might be using, and their service will automatically renew. And if you set it up following the instructions, it'll automatically install those certificates. It's pretty much run and forget, and yeah, you don't have worries about things expiring and having to keep up with that. And what it also will do is, if you configure it, it'll send you an email if something goes wrong and the renewal doesn't happen. So again, rather than your customers saying, "Oh, why is my website not secure? Why is this error coming up?" You'll know in advance that that's going to happen. A key thing to cover here is that there's more than just setting HTTPS up. It's really important that you think that there's a lot of HTTPS exploits out there. These are just some ones that got plenty of press attention, and that's simply that there's older suites out there that are insecure. I'm not really going to talk about the technical way that you would set that up. I think it's just a simple matter of finding the right documentation for the server or system that you're using. TLS version 3 is like the latest standard of encryption in HTTPS, and it's got a couple of advantages, which is obviously it's more secure, but it also slightly speeds up the negotiation process. So it's well worth making sure that that's active, and actually most browsers are supporting that. So maybe that's all you need, but it might depend if you've got some customers that have to use older browsers for some reason. We'd recommend using a checking tool. So there's a few of them, but this is just one example. And they'll go through everything about the certificate and the way it's installed. And you really want to be trying to look for an A or an A+ rating. And what it'll also then do is it gives you a report on things like, well, what ciphers are you using? So and it gives you the score based on those things. So if you see these weak ones, these are TLS version 1.2 ciphers. So you can go through on your web server or your proxy, and you can disable these ones. And that means that you're only using cipher suites that are considered secure. And I think that's a process that you should sort of do probably fairly regularly. The next thing I want to talk about is strict transport security. So this is a feature that if we look at a typical way that would happen if somebody goes to the non-SSL version of your site, they would get redirected by your server to the SSL version of the site, and you think, well, that's fine, that means everything's secure. But a sort of typical attack vector that's kind of really easy to do is if you set up a malicious Wi-Fi and you just take a sort of copy of something that you where you want to try and steal somebody's credentials, you can just route traffic that's connected to that Wi-Fi to there. And the user's probably not likely to notice that they're not in HTTPS mode. And if you do a really good job of mimicking the site, it's a way of harvesting credentials, and it's quite a simple thing to do, but there's also quite a simple fix for it. So we can set a header on our outgoing requests, and we can say strict transport security. And what that does is it says to the browser, remember that this is a HTTPS site. And so if somebody's got a bookmark, or they just forget or whatever, and they end up going to the HTTP version, the browser won't even go there. The browser's only going to go to the HTTPS version. And then if somebody's trying to spoof your site and they won't have the validation of that certificate, and the error will come up, and the user will be aware that something's going on, and yeah, unlikely to lose credentials that way. Another modern feature we have is you can add preload to that header, and that actually then adds your domain name to a list of pre-configured browsers. So most modern browsers support this, where they actually remember before you even go to this the first time that the site is secure, and that way, yeah, traffic will never actually go to your HTTP site, and that's just something that you can sort of set up and do. You can go to hstspreload.org and you can actually verify that you're set up in there. The next thing I want to talk about is clickjacking. It's kind of a common sort of threat, and what this is it's somebody will set up a site. We'll call it a malicious site, but it might not look that way. It might have something interesting, and there'll be a click button on it. And what they can do is set an invisible iframe on top of that to your site. And they position it just right so that when somebody goes to click what they think is a link, they're actually clicking into a link that's on their site. And if they've logged into that already and they have a session, then that could potentially cause something to happen that you don't want to have happen, such as deleting content. And it's basically just tricking somebody into clicking something that they didn't mean to. And again, a simple thing to fix on this is to set what's called X-frame options. And this just says to the browser, don't load my site in a site that's not me. And it's quite a simple thing. You can deny it altogether, or if you need to use frames in your own site for whatever reason, you can set it to same origin, and it'll just make sure that the browser says only render my site in my domain. And also then, if for example you have widgets or something that you want to embed in other websites, then you can use content security policy to define that, and I'll talk about that shortly. The other important thing to talk about with these kind of exploits is making sure that your session information, so the login information of your user, doesn't even get there, even if you say you need to use for iframes. So a typical cookie header would look like this. There'd also be the actual value of the cookie, but I've just left that off for simplicity. And what we can add to that is a secure flag, and that basically says don't use my cookie in HTTP, so that you can't accidentally sort of send that insecurely, which you don't want your session information getting leaked. You can set HTTP only. This means that your cookie will only get sent with HTTP requests as opposed to JavaScript. And so then again, if something does happen, it's just adding another layer of protection to prevent sensitive information in cookies from being sent in a malicious way. So something like Volto, you would still use this because Volto doesn't send cookies when it's talking to the API. So it's just a really useful thing to have unless you've got a really specific use case. And the other flag that we would set is same site equals strict. And again, that just means you're just saying don't send that cookie to anybody but me. So it's just like if there's anything else misconfigured, it's kind of a sort of catch-all that will help to make sure that cookies don't go to the wrong place. So the last big thing I really wanted to talk about on this side of things is cross-site scripting attacks. I'm sure many people know what it is, but I'm just going to give a really sort of simple overview of what a cross-site scripting attack is and how it sort of plays out. So a lot of a lot of places would have a form. So like, for example, a login form, and you might want to send the user to somewhere else after they've logged in. And so you would take the input of where they were as a query string. And then when you write your form, you would put a hidden input in so that the form action code would know where to send you after the redirect you after the login. And so if somebody was to say trick you to visiting this URL and you weren't correctly handling this information, then this would get rendered. And this is basically, really basic thing. It's not something that I think Plone's not really vulnerable to this. But this is a really basic just cross-site scripting attack. And you can see that it just closes the tag, creates a script tag, and then they've got kind of a lot of access. They can do a lot of stuff in a script that's really dangerous. So you could rely on the way that your web application or Plone is set up to protect you from that, and Plone has a security team, and they make sure that if there was any kind of cross-site scripting, then it gets patched really well. But what you can also do on top of that is set what's known as a content security policy header. So an example of that is there. So I'll talk about these things more. But what this really does is say to the browser, don't do certain things. It lets you define what is and isn't allowed. It's essentially an allow list of what's there, and then the browser can block everything else. So some examples of what you can set are self. That basically says, yes, I can have a script, but it's only script from my website. You can have data. So I think sometimes if you've got, say, an image, you might embed the images as data in the HTML, and that's going to allow that. You can say HTTPS. This one's perhaps not as secure, but it means that things can't get rendered from non-HTTPS sites. And then there's the bad things. So what you could one of the problems with content security policy is it blocks things. So if you've got code that's got scripts in there that you need to run, they'll get blocked by the browser and you'll lose functionality. So you could set this unsafe inline script, but inline flag, but that's essentially turning this policy off. So it's quite difficult if you've got a lot of widgets, things like YouTube or Twitter or embedded things, to sort of think, well, how do I go about knowing what that is without disabling functionality on an active website? So what that allows you to, so what you have is a content security policy report only header. This basically just does the exact same thing content security policy does, but it doesn't actually enforce it. But what it will do is it sends anything that the browser tries to do or would have blocked to a website that can ingest those. So it's a bit like Sentry. There's other services, but URIports.com is one that you can sign up to. They give you a code and you put that in the header, and then you get a dashboard which shows you all of the things that are there. So that allows you to run it for a period of time on your website to collect the sites that you're sending out. And then you'll get a list, and it helps you to actually configure the full report only policy. And then when okay. Yeah. And then what you can do is implement that policy. You can remove report only, and then it will start enforcing it. You can keep report to, and you can be alerted then if you've missed something. And I think the other important thing that does is it gives you an insight. So if you start seeing some really weird URLs in your dashboard, you know that you've got a problem on the site. So maybe it's just a Plone site. Maybe you've uncovered a vulnerability. And if that happens, you should email security@plone.org and maybe not post it publicly. The security team will investigate. They'll fix it, and they'll release a hot fix for it in the kind of in a proper way. So there's that. Yeah. So I'll move on to some Plone specific stuff. So we'll start with some basic things. I mean, I would hope that it's not really needed to be said, but we'll just run through them anyway. So changing the default admin password before you put a site live. Maybe you don't know, maybe you do, but like if you've got a ZMI admin user that you set up, that can log into the site. So if it's just left as admin, it's got like the keys to the castle. And so just something to remember that, you need to have a policy, or you need to just make sure that gets changed. Disabling ZMI access from the web. Again, it's I'm not quite sure. Maybe more modern versions of Zope and the ZMI is considered more secure, but it's unlikely that there's any need for end users of the site to be going to those URLs, and you should be blocking those in front of Plone. And then if you need to access it for admin purposes, you would use something like an SSH tunnel, or if you're using a VPN, so that you're only accessing those internally and securely. Installing hotfixes. There's a website, plone.org/security/hotfixes. They also announce them on all the sort of channels. If there is anything wrong, they usually announce beforehand that there's something coming to give you time to prepare, and then they'll release a hotfix. Hotfixes are generally like really easy to install. They're sort of the minimum amount to fix the problem, so they shouldn't break anything. Usually very well tested. And I think, yeah, they can be installed in a few different ways to make it easy. Especially if you've got an older site that can't necessarily be rebuilt too easily. And yeah, using Python 3, I think plenty of people can't. They have older sites, they can't upgrade. It's not an easy sell to customers to say, oh, Python 2's out of support. Can you give us a load of money to upgrade it, even though not much else is going to change? Or maybe they don't have budget to upgrade. What was I going to say? Oh, yes, sorry. One thing you can do if you're using an older Python is if it's running on Ubuntu, they have a pro service, and they will actually put out fixes for out of support Python 2 vulnerabilities. It's a paid service, but it might be worth it if you need to enhance security and there's no other way of doing that. There might be other services, but I know Ubuntu's one. And they offer, I think there's a free tier, which can be used for business purposes, but I think it depends on how you're deploying it. And then there's loads of paid tiers with lots of security support as well. So it's probably well worth looking at if you're using Python 2. So when I talked about cloud services and when you audit them, I'm talking about things like having password policies and using multi-factor. And it's perhaps something that you want to offer customers as well, so that they can be secure, and that if they need to be audited or something, that they can be confident that their information is secure. And so there's a few packages you can use that will help with that. The first one is this collective password strength plugin. At the moment, there's a branch for Plone 5 and 6. I don't think it's released yet. It allows you to set a password policy, a minimum password strength that users have to do when setting and changing their password. And it's very configurable. So if you've got specific rules, or you want to enable, or you have a customer that needs specific password strength policy, this is a great plugin to use. There's collective.google authenticator. This gives you multi-factor support in Plone. At the moment, it's not fully supported in 5 and 6. I've actually been working on it, and I got some help earlier in the week. So I'm hoping to maybe have that fixed and released over the sprints. It's pretty much working. It just needs a bit of tidying up and documenting. And another product that is really good from a security point of view is login lockout. This does a few things. So it's a brute force protection. So you could configure it to say, if you get X number of failed logins, you can block that user or IP address for a certain amount of time. It has a control panel which lets you set whitelists and blacklists of IP numbers. So if you've got a customer we certainly got one that says, well, we only have staff at a very specific set of locations that are logging in, so we don't want anybody else to be able to log in just generally on the internet. And finally, it has a control panel which gives you an overview of when you've got failed logins. So if you've got a customer that's just had a bad morning and can't seem to get their password right, and they can ring up or put in a support ticket, and it's really easy to just reset them. I think you can also just reset your password if you lock yourself out. And if you can't be bothered with all of those, then there's PAS plugins automatic, and that just hands off your security to somebody else like Google or GitHub, and there's plenty of other providers around there. I would say it's maybe a little bit fiddly to get set up at once, but I think it just kind of takes a lot of the hassle of these other sort of packages out of the way. Maybe not everybody can do that. I think maybe some people have customers where that's not possible. But it's certainly a really good plugin, and that works, I think, across all versions of Plone. So finally, we've got Volto. Content security policy in Volto is a little bit tricky. because Volto actually sets a load of inline scripts and styles. And so if you just simply say, oh, well, let's allow inline scripts and styles, then you haven't really got a secure content security policy, and you'll fail sort of a penetration test or something. That this has happened to us. So yeah, it would require use of unsafe inline. So there's a couple of packages that are in the works. So there's Volto CSP. This is an add-on that will take these styles and scripts, and it will take a hash of the value, and it adds that to the header. And what that's basically doing is saying, don't allow any script, but only allow scripts that match this this particular signature. And they both kind of do the same thing, but the middleware helmet adds them as headers, and the CSP package at the moment is the one that does the signatures. So we're hoping maybe over the weekend to sort of integrate those together and release something. Yeah. Oh, coming soon. What's the key? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And yeah. So as well as adding those hashes to the header, it also gives you a place where you can add additional sources. So yeah, if you've got widgets and Twitter and things like that, it will allow you to do that. So yeah, hopefully that'll be released soon. So yeah, let's talk about cross-origin resource sharing. I think anybody that's tried to do much with Volto might have hit this, and it's super annoying. What cross-origin resource sharing does, a lot of browsers now will prevent JavaScript from accessing or connecting remotely to a site that's not your site. So the sort of standard way of doing Volto is to redirect ++ API path to the backend. And so that's fine. It's the same origin, so there's no issue there. But maybe you want to have API.your-site, or maybe you want to use third-party things to load things in. And so what you do is the server side will add this origin, allow origin header, and that says to the browser that if you've come from the main site, you can connect to this server. And it also, you can configure it to say actually allow credentials. So if you've got a backend API that you need to be logged into, then that will do that. It's configured on the backend, not the front end. It's kind of the other way around. It's the backend saying only sites that are this site can talk to me. It's not the front end saying these are the sites these are the backends that you can connect to. There's a few gotchas with it. I think that's maybe where some frustration comes in. You can only use one. I think documentation might make it seem like you can add 3 or 4 different backends, but the browser just won't do that. They'll just take one. And so the only real way I think around that is to have something on a proxy or somewhere that will basically say you've maybe got a whitelist of sites that are allowed, and you'll get an origin header coming in, and you can sort of replay that back out. I think just I've read that there are some exploits there if you're not careful on reading and writing. So let's say you've got a regex wildcard for the start of your domain because you've got maybe multiple API paths or something, and then somebody can register like badmydomain.com and it would allow that, and so then that could be used to leverage an attack. And the other thing is wildcards are allowed, so you can say star.mysite.com, but as soon as you use a wildcard, the access control allow credentials is turned off. And so again, you might think, well, why isn't it working? That's probably a good reason why. Or you could just, maybe not use CORS. I think a few basic things for the build stack security. When you start a project in Volto, if you use the sort of official way from the documentation to set things up, you're going to get things set up out of the box to be the right way, and so it's much easier to just be secure that way, because you're getting the latest things, and if things change for new projects and things, you're able to keep up to date with that without too much effort. So when you do that, and if you're using GitHub, they give you a service. I think it's free. It's called Dependabot. And what that does is it keeps track of all the dependencies in your Volto project. So there's hundreds, possibly thousands of packages through npm. And if there's any vulnerabilities in those, it will give you a pull request to say update just this one dependency. So instead of having to worry about updating the whole thing and worrying about breakages, it's really just the minimum amount, and when there's known vulnerabilities within your stack. And Really, I don't think there's much other way of knowing that, because there's just so many of them. I think you can run npm audit and things like that, but this is just giving you that kind of much easier. The cookie cutter comes with a CI/CD setup out of the box, and again, it will really help to make sure that things won't break when you're updating, just to try and ease the process of keeping things up to date. Yeah, sorry, it comes with tests, basic tests. Yeah. So I've got about a couple of minutes. There was a few things that I could probably talk on for a while, but I think I'll just quickly sort of run through them. So rate limiting is something, it's perhaps not giving us security, but it gives us some protection against people that are really not legitimate users. So it's perhaps a bit tricky to set up. We found it not too bad. I think there's lots of different ways you can do it. The way we kind of do it is you get an initial spike of requests that you're allowed to make. So when somebody initially comes to the site, they're going to be downloading all the JavaScript and CSS and images and things. And so maybe for the first minute, they get a high number, and then for 10 minutes, it's slightly lower, and then over an hour, it's even lower. And what that does is, if somebody's just hammering the site with requests for stuff that's not legitimate, they get blocked before it's even touching Plone. And I think that's really useful for us in terms of resources and not being brought down rather than actually security. We tend to find that when rate limiting is kicking in, it's because we're there's the scans going on and things like that. It's very rarely that we have legitimate traffic causing these spikes. In fact, I don't think we've ever had an incident where a customer's complained or anything for legitimate traffic, and we do log it so we can see when it's happening and why it's happening. Fail to ban. This was originally made as a package for SSH on a server, and what it does is it scans logs, and it finds incorrect login attempts, certainly for SSH, and it puts that IP address in a jail for a particular period of time. So again, it's a really simple, really easy to install and set up on servers, and it just gives you that brute force protection. And they also offer configs for every kind of server, so all the different types of servers, and they have lists of common web exploit URLs. So if people are just scanning the site for exploits, you can ban them really quickly. And again, there's some security help there, but it's mostly about just getting rid of traffic that's not legitimate and it's only going to cause problems. And there's an additional package that's got a bunch of like common web exploits. So people scanning for like WordPress and Drupal exploits, they're not legitimate users. They can be banned. And again, it's configurable for how long they're banned for, but it's just a really neat package. The details of email security would probably be a whole other talk. So I'll just quickly run through it. I think we go to all this effort of security, but if you don't have secure email, then it's just the human error side of things. People can be tricked into opening attachments or doing things or sending money or giving credentials away because they think they're talking to somebody that they know. Especially with remote working and things where you might just get a request saying, oh, can you action this please, and it's a PDF, and maybe you're busy and you just open it. So SPF is called Sender Policy Framework. What that does is you set some DNS up which says only these servers are allowed to send email as me, and most incoming email will check that. So it's just sort of it's a white list of servers that can send email as your domain. DKIM is domain keys management. I forget the details. Again, what it does is you set a public key up in DNS, and all of your outgoing emails on your server then get signed with the private key. And what that means is receiving servers can check to make sure that your server actually sent that email and it's legitimate, and maybe the IP hasn't been spoofed or something. And DMARC is a reporting and it's kind of similar to the content security policy reporting. I think URI ports give a service for this as well, and you can basically say, here's an address and a key. And it's set up in DNS as well. And what it does, any server that's receiving email, they can check that policy, and if they would have banned that email, they can send a message to URI ports. And so again, you can set all your features of security up in a report only way, which means that you've got a chance to set it all up before you put it in live, and you can catch any misconfigurations so that you're not losing legitimate email before you set it up. And it also says what are the rules? What are the rules for an email? I think this is something to look at, but it's definitely something worth implementing across your emails. And it's not just security; it's also about deliverability. If you're getting clients complaining that they're not receiving your emails and things, this is a way of sort of saying I'm a good citizen of email, and you're more likely to get emails delivered and not get bounced. There was a couple of headers I just left out, but they're kind of important. So feature policy is a header, and that lets you control what are the JavaScript features that are allowed on this site, and I think maybe other features. So for example, if you don't need the microphone or camera in your JavaScript, you just add a header that says disable the microphone, disable the camera. It's just about having a minimum allowed list of things that you need for functionality. And referrer policy, I'm not sure how relevant it is now, but I think what that does is it prevents, it tells the browser not to send the next site you visit the site you were just on. So if somebody say got a tab open and they click a link and they move on to the next site, that site won't know that you came from here. And it's just a kind of useful thing for sort of keeping yourself a bit more hidden on the web. So yeah, thank you very much. Uh-oh.
We just had a Google Summer of Code project regarding passwordless Plone,
Okay.
which basically allows you to authenticate against Plone using either your YubiKey or Touch ID, for example, on your Mac. So it's not completely finished project.
Okay.
It's more kind of frame because many questions are still open, but generally basically have an option right now in Plone to basically authenticate against your biometric key, for example, either using directly as primary option or perhaps as a secondary option as
amazing.
two-factor.
What's it called?
It's called Collective Web Authn. It basically implements the Feature2 standard, or basically passkeys, what we have in
brilliant.
the browser right now.
Amazing.
So it's basically more framework right now than a installed add-on, but basically functionality is there.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Just another note, in Plone 6, I think Plone Session allows you to enable per user keyrings via the ZMI. And what that will do is when you log out, the session cannot be reused. So if you can't steal the AC cookie and then reuse it. So but you have to manually enable that in the ZMI.
Yeah. So I think that's just because when Plone creates a cookie, it doesn't creates a session. It's more of an encrypted string. It's not something that it remembers in the back end. So when you log out, that could just be reused. So they do expire, but so I think that this is a package for rotating that. I think when you log out.
Just a question about the rate limiting. What sort of tools do you use for doing that?
Yeah, we use HA proxy. Okay. So that's got they're called sticky sessions or something. No, it's not. There's like a set of pools you can set up with different rules, and so they essentially you can send them to different queues, or you can.
But this is based on some cookie that you're relying on the client to send back, or IP address, or
no. So the rules we kind of have it's for uncached content, so we don't mind too much about cache stuff. That doesn't really cause us any issues. But and it's IP address and user agent.
Okay.
And depending, and I think we've got some whitelists for customers where we've got a customer that's using a big just a single IP, so it's kind of really hard to do them. But it's quite straightforward, and things like Nginx and Apache all have sort of rate limiting functions that are there.
Thanks.
So thank you.
Thank you.